Okay, hello everyone and welcome back to Sprocket. I know it's been a long time since we last had a Sprocket video, but I thought to break up all of the Dead Island stuff that I've been doing recently, I thought I would jump back into Sprocket, and we're not in the most recent alpha of Sprocket, by the way, as you may have noticed from the fact that I've got this Sturmpanzer Königsmörder. We are instead back in 0.127. I haven't actually really played with the new alpha, so I haven't made any tanks in the new alpha patch, which includes geometric internals and stuff. And all of the old tanks don't work in geometric internals because it's difficult to calculate all of the different things. So yeah, I'm still in 1.27 for these next couple of videos is what it's probably going to have to be. But I'm basically going to show, before 2.0 actually comes out, I'm basically going to show off all of the designs that you haven't seen that I have made since the last Sprocket video, which I can't even remember what it is. And if I go over some designs which I have previously shown, my apologies. However, most of the stuff that I'm showing here should be new, such as this Flakpanzer Königsmörder, which is basically just my copy of the Flakpanzer A7V, which was a German, basically just strapping loads of machine guns to a bottomed out hull of an A7V, and so that's what I've done. Hence why I was showing you the Königsmörder before showing you this thing, because as you can see, it is quite literally that original tank which has just been changed. I say changed. It's been highly modified, as you can see from well. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. Yeah, as you can see from the fact that it's been entirely cut off. What the hell's going on there? Okay, I don't know why that's still floating. But yeah, as you can tell from the fact that it's all been cut off, and these flaks have been put in its place. I say flaks, they're MG08s. That's what we've got going on here. So, as you can see, very high rate of fire, very low penetration. Yeah, they are quite literally just Flakpanzer. They are pretty much just MG08 15s, or MG08s at least, which have been added onto a flattened part of the original Königsmörder. Sprocket doesn't like the amount of bullets going on. Come on, Sprocket. There we go. So yeah, Sprocket was just having a bit of problem figuring out all of this stuff going on. Let me just, there you go. But as you can see, it works exactly as you would expect. They're just a bunch of machine guns. The rear one can also fire. If I was to come over here, the rear one should fire at least. And we do have an option for APHE, which would make more sense for anti-tank or anti-air rather than the AP of the that was previously loaded. But as you can see, it really doesn't have a lot of penetration. It is just an MG08, and these armoured cars are really the bane of our existence because we can't penetrate them, because it is just a Flakpanzer. But yeah, so that is the Flakpanzer Königsmörder. As for the next thing I'm going to show, it's this thing, which is my copy of the Whippet. As you can see, it's very Whippet in look, and yeah, it's got the engines at the front. That's for the transmission at the front there. Engine all the way along here, and then here is just some machine gun points. And I decided to give it a turret, which has got a, I think, 2-pounder gun in it or something along those lines. Well, it's now got a twin gun apparently. There you go, 40mm. So yeah, it's a 2-pounder gun that's in there with how much penetration? 51mm of penetration, and yeah, it's just your standard Whippet clone basically. It's relatively fast actually for what it is. 12 kilometers an hour, 13 kilometers an hour. I think it can actually get up to like something like 16 kilometers. possibly. I mean, we're reaching 15 right now. There you go. Look at this speed. You've never seen speed like it. Armour-wise, it's not very good. The Flakpanzer Königsmortar, by the way, has got the same armour as the Sturmpanzer, so yeah. This armour is, I think, 25mm at the front or something along those lines. And as you can see, yeah, it's gone ahead. And they've blown up our engine straight away. I can't remember what the put out fire button is. Might be F. Oh, there you go, it's F. I think I'm too slow. Yeah. So both of our tanks are dead, as you can see, from the fact that we just don't have very good armour. If you have a look here, it's 20mm there. Yeah, 20mm. This is sloped because of the transmission housing, but yeah, it's all 20mm at the front. I think it's probably 15 at the sides and what? Oh, 15 at the rear. Okay, not bad. And then the roof is still just the default 10, same as up here for the engine decking. Yeah, it's all pretty much terrible World War I armour, but you know, it's not bad for, yeah, it's bulletproof. That's all you really need. And I did make a Mark II version, or at least tried to, which has got a classic Whippet top on it. The top is still a turret, technically, so it doesn't actually turn. The turret doesn't actually move, but it does have a machine gun in it, which is, yeah, nice and satisfying to use. And yeah, the top is a turret which I've just given a 0 traverse either side so that it doesn't actually move, and all the machine guns are basically just being moved upwards. I did try extending the actual hull itself, but because of all of the various points in the freeform, it was really struggling. So I just thought, you know what, screw it, we'll just add a top turret on instead and make that not turn. So, but as you can see, it is just a machine gun on the Empire Mark II land ship. It's nothing too crazy, and that is it. Really, for this, there's not much more to say about it. And I think that's all of the World War I stuff we have going on here. I've shown the Rolls Ponsonby and various other things like that. So, yep, nothing more to show there. I am going to switch to this faction now, the other faction, because I do have some things to show here. So I do have this, which was for the Spanish Civil War contest that went on. It is missing some decals, such as the Spanish Civil War decal there, and this had the "They shall not pass," basically, Spanish thing that came up during the Civil War for the Republicans. This is for the Republicans, by the way. It's Soviet Lend-Lease. It's a Soviet Lend-Lease version of... well, it is of the... let me see if there is actually... No, I don't have it here. But the story behind this, the lore that I made for this, right, is... if I quickly switch to the World War I faction again, actually, because this will be easier. What this is, during the Russian Civil War, the British sent, well, Ponsonby more than anything, sent the Rolls Ponsonby armoured car prototypes that weren't adopted into service. They sent these over to the White Russians. The White Russians used them to fight against the Reds. The White Russians obviously lost. The Reds took hold of these things, put them into storage. Come to 1936, Spanish Civil War's coming up. The Russians want to help the Republicans, so what they do is they take this Rolls Ponsonby armoured car, they take it, they stick a 20mm gun in there, which was technical limitations due to the contest in Sprocket, but for for lore-wise, the Soviets went ahead and stuck a 20mm Shuvok cannon into there, or TNSH cannon, I should say, into there, and that's what's in there now. So I don't think I actually named this, I think it is literally just called cannon. But yeah, so the Soviets took it, they stuck that in there, they added some covering there, and they sent it off to the Spanish Civil War to fight for the Republicans. So here it is. Again, the cannon doesn't shoot very fast, which was a technical limitation because of the contest. The contest said no file editing, which meant cannons couldn't be made to shoot any faster than was allowed. So unfortunately this is using just a gunner at 1.0, so hence why it's a relatively low rate of fire for a 20mm autocannon. However, yeah, this is it. It doesn't turn very well as per the original design. It actually turns slightly better in this era because it's not limited to the World War I engine power and whatnot, so it does actually turn not as poorly due to being early war era, which is kind of nice. None of the armour was changed either. This is default Ponsonby Rolls armour, so 10mm all around, same with the turret. 10 turret is all the same as well. However, this isn't where the story of the Prontnik Ponsonby ends, which is just Ponsonby armoured car in Russian as far as Google Translate was concerned. But there is also, and I'm going to have to change, I think. Oh no, there it is. Sperrpanzerwagen. So what happened is during the Civil War, the Germans captured a couple of examples of the Soviet armoured car, and they put it into their own service. And that's basically what this is. So you've had a British armoured car from World War I, which has been sent over to Russia, fought for the Whites, was captured by the Reds, went into service in the Soviet army, to be sent to the Spanish Civil War to fight for the Republicans, only to be captured by the German Condor Legion. And that's what we've got going on here. So it is quite literally just the same armoured car. I changed absolutely nothing about the stats. The reason that I have this German version in the first place is that the contest host very kindly let me change after the contest was ended, because I sent in one of my Italian armoured cars to fight for the Italian army. Italian light tanks. It did extremely poorly, and the contest host basically allowed me to submit this armoured car for the German side, for the nationalist side. Hence why we've now got this here. Oh yeah, by the way, the Soviets also added a machine gun, I think, there. That wasn't in the original design, but the Soviets decided to stick it in there anyway. And so yeah, I was able to put this in for the Germans, and it actually came out pretty well. It did a lot better than the Italian armoured car, which is saying something. But yeah, so there's that. As for the other stuff we've got going on here, none of this is new, and not all of it is mine, so I can't show it to you. But then we do have this thing, which again, missing decals because I made these on my laptop, and it doesn't share paint, for example. It doesn't share paintwork or decals. But this was for the Capital Tank Project contest, and I initially made this as a meme tank, right? I wanted to do something like the Object 279E, which is the Soviet nuclear tank, which has all of the tracks. You've seen it in War Thunder, you've seen it in World of Tanks, and I essentially wanted to try something like that and have the tracks really close together. Unfortunately, without file editing, this is the closest I could make it. And so what I've got here is essentially mouse tracks in the end, which has got a lot of wheels, as you can see, a lot of wheels on it, lots of thick wheels as well, and it's got these extra track plates, it's got these extra plating as well, which increases the thickness, which you could do. You couldn't stack them, but you could have one of each type. So I've got these plates here which give extra frontal armour, because there was a frontal armour limit. I think, yeah, 160mm of frontal armour limit on these tanks. However, spaced armour was turned off, so additional armour plating did actually add to the armour amount. So I basically had this really strong frontally armoured tank, and I thought, you know what, I haven't done a rear turreted tank design in ages, let's make it rear turreted as well, which makes it really poor at going over ridges. And I thought this thing was going to do really, really terribly. But it didn't. This thing actually did not bad. It actually survived all the way to the final fight, and actually won the final fight as well, because there was multiple tanks, obviously, Sprocket contests. If you've ever taken part in a Sprocket contest before, you know how Sprocket contests work. There's multiple different rounds, and depending on how well your tank did, the more The more tanks survive, the more tanks go into the next round, etc, etc. And I expected this thing to die around round 1, maybe round 2, but it didn't. It made it all the way to the final fight, and it actually won the final fight, which is very impressive. It also has a 90mm gun on. There were some certain gun selections that we had to use, and I chose the 90mm because it was the biggest gun around. Was it the 90mm that I put in here? I put the biggest gun that I could, basically, in here. So it is the 90mm. So it's the 90mm with the maximum barrel length, etc, etc, to give it the most penetration, the biggest gun, the biggest meme tank around. And as you can see, it's incredibly wide, incredibly fat, but it's also incredibly well armoured. And it was the armouring that really saved me, I think, in this, because we had to fight various tanks of increasing difficulties, and I think the things that saved me here, the contest host said that the wide tracks didn't do anything for me. I was hoping that it would. They would act as like spaced armour. Apparently they didn't. However, I reckon the massive frontal engine block, because again there were mobility options as well that you had to go for. There were minimum mobility requirements that you had to go for, which is why this thing has got a massive engine in it. Yeah, it's got an incredibly large 14 cylinder, essentially boat engine in this thing. But we had to get a certain amount of horsepower per ton, and so I think the massive engine block is what also saved me, because shells were just being eaten by the engine. So it actually didn't do too badly, but this is the Capital Tank Project, as it was known, and this is just the Breakthrough Tank Model 101, well, Capital Project 101, so it's experimental tank, and Breakthrough is the designation given in the factory or whatever blueprints. And also having spare tracks would allow you to bring back tanks that were already disabled back into the fight, so hence why they're here. They also act as extra spaced armour. So yeah, that's the Capital Tank Project. Then we have this thing, which was for a Korean War contest that went on. And this thing, if I switch to Britain, because Britain did take part in the Korean War, however there was only an American and a Chinese side, and you had either American mediums or American heavies, and the Chinese had Chinese mediums and I think export tanks. And obviously there was no British representation, so I teamed up with somebody else who was also doing a British-styled tank, and I thought, you know what, I'm getting Britain in here, and I'm getting an infantry tank in here. So what I did is I took the Mark III Castle, which is right here, and I changed it to work within the requirements of the contest. It required a lot of changing, I will say that much. The castle shape is there, but a lot of the castle had to be changed for the American export version, and there was obviously changes that I had to do to make it American feeling, which meant that I had to change up the gun. The gun was no longer the 105mm that's mounted on the Mark III Castle here. So there are various changes that happened. Let me switch back and show you the export version now that you've seen the original Mark III. So the Mark III, where is it? There you go, US export version, as you can see, it is taller. Also, this front plate has been remodeled to make it climb. There were climbing requirements and other requirements that had to be made, so yeah, this was changed to be a more extreme angle so that it could actually climb over the steps. I changed the gun to be a 90mm, American 90mm, because, you know, Americans love doing that. Instead of being the British gun, mount an American gun with American munitions. It makes more sense. It's obviously in an American green. The suspension was raised as well to help it with climbing up the step. A 50 cal was mounted up there. I think some armour changes happened as well. Obviously these are extra bolt-on armour as well, just to give it some extra American feeling, plus the American tank strap. What's it called? Track. There you go. I was struggling to think of the name there. But yeah, plus the extra track link over the front. The tracks were also changed as well, talking of, as you can tell, they're no longer the original British track links on here. These are different track links to make it feel more American. I think that's also an addition. the side ejection for the getting rid of the spent rounds. Also, we have got the American D-Day stripes and a bunch of American stars on there as well, which the British tanks did also have in the Korean War, I believe. It's also got a new engine as well. Gone is the British twin V6s or whatever, and instead what we've got in here is a big old American V8 engine, which gives it 18 horsepower per ton ratio, because this is, after all, a heavy tank. And you know, we won. For the American team, we won with this tank. This tank and the tank that I was with basically suffered very few losses, apart from certain ones which was either a bloodbath against our tanks or it was incredibly close. However, the power of the infantry tank and my fellow competitor as well, my fellow ally, because it was a team match, so me and my fellow ally, we managed to successfully defend South Korea against the North Koreans and Chinese and Soviet and export tanks that we came up against. There were some meme tanks, obviously, beyond mine as well. However, yeah, the castle did prevail, and that is the infantry tank that you see here. So there's that. Then we've got a couple of Polish tanks because the first round of the Spanish Civil War was sort of for this alternative timeline overarching set of contests that's going on. So the armoured cars were for round 1. Round 2 was the invasion of Poland, and basically whichever side won was what determined history. So in the case of the Spanish Civil War, I think the Republicans won, I believe, in the battles, which meant that the Republican side won the Spanish Civil War. Then it came to the Polish invasion of Poland, which, if Germany got stopped here, obviously that would change history again. However, Germany didn't win this one. However, we do have this. Is my first submission. I decided to go with Poland because I decided I didn't want to make German stuff. So there's a lot of stuff going on here, but I did show you earlier the Empire landship. And what this is another entirely convoluted way to get Poland to own this tank. But basically what happened is, obviously, Russian Civil War, Empire landships get sent over to fight with the Whites. So the White Russians get Empire landships to fight the Reds. The Whites lose. The Reds get hold of these things, put them into storage. Some of these get stored in Poland. Come the liberation of Poland from the Polish Civil War, the Polish War of Independence against the Soviets, the Reds at this point. But come that, the Poles get some of these things, fight for independence using these. Obviously not in this configuration, but they do get some empires on their hands. They use them, they get independence, they put the empires in storage. Come the Germans, 20 years later. The Germans come around, and the Germans are going to invade. So the Poles break out the old landship here. They then acquire, I'm not going to explain how, but they acquire a couple of Victorian battleship turrets, which is what this is, which I've taken from my land battleship. Get a hold of some of these Victorian battleship turrets, mount in them some, 2-pounder guns, which they've acquired somehow, mount a machine gun in the other side, because obviously it's a twin setup turret, but obviously you only want one gun in there, so you've got a 40mm in there. Machine gun turret in there. They lowered the hull profile because there was a height limit for the contest, so they lowered the hull profile, mounted the turret on top, and that's what we've got here. You've got some turrets which have been you've got some custom made, and I'm quite happy with these, but you have some custom made hatches which have basically just been cut out and welded and various other things bolted on here. Commander's cupolas there, big old rear turrets here to mount ammunition and stuff, and it's incredibly beaten up, it's incredibly old, but here it is. And it's also got a lifeboat up there which is just left over from the days of it being on a battleship. And that's what we've got going on here. It's a Polish light tank. it's a crappy Polish light tank. It didn't get through to the combat trials, well, to the combat phase, because only the top tanks in each what's it called? In each category were able to go through to the combat stage. However, it was a meme tank. It didn't actually do too badly. It actually beat, I think, some of the other competitors in terms of scoring, which was incredibly funny. But yeah, here we go, and it's got a ladder rung stuck to the side of it, and it is a mashup of stuff. And again, it's got incredibly convoluted lore, and I think it probably also has got new, a new engine and new transmission, etc., etc. But yeah, here we go. It's also incredibly poorly armoured. I think the turret is probably the most well-armoured thing here. Let's have a look. Armour-wise, 20mm. Yeah, it's similar. So yeah, it's 20mm all around on the turret actually, which makes it better armoured than the hull, which is 15 on the sides, because again, this is the base landship Mark 1. So yeah. But there it is. That's the Polish thing. As for the other Polish thing, I think I class this as like a medium tank. But it's essentially my attempt at making a Polish Churchill / heavy tank thing. So it's got lots of small wheels, it's got the maximum amount of frontal armour I could have, which is 50mm on the front of the turret. And then we've got 40mm on the side, 30 on the rear, I'm guessing. Yep, 30 on the rear. And it's got a 37mm or something, 50mm gun. Wow, look at that. Yeah, so it's got a 50mm gun, which has got 79mm of penetration. It didn't do very well, apparently. It definitely didn't get through to the combat stage. However, it's just a funny looking thing. It's kind of ARL-ish with its sloped rear, because I decided I didn't want to make just a copy of an infantry tank, so it's got this funny sloped rear, which I kind of like. And yeah, it's not the greatest of tanks, but it's definitely funny looking. It's definitely interwar looking, I think, or at least early war looking, experimental sort of heavy tankish. But yeah, it's not too bad. The gun has got a nice lot of recoil, as you can see lots of going in, which is kind of funny. But yeah, it's not too bad driving. Mobility wise, it's not too bad either. I went with these World War I style track plates because I quite like them, and we've got the wheels running within the gap here, as you can see. So yeah, it's a funny looking tank, but it's kind of fun. And then we come to this thing, which is a Swedish export tank, I think, for a fictional invasion of Sweden contest. I do also have another tank for this. I can't remember what it is. It's not the Gladiator, I remember that much. It's not the Gull. It's not that. That's from somebody else. It's none of these things. That's it. This is it. The Motstånd light infantry tank, which I can't remember what that translates to, if anyone speaks Swedish or knows Swedish. Which I can't remember this. This was a while ago, this contest, so I can't remember exactly what it was. But yeah, this thing, again, miniaturized Churchill. That's the theme of this thing. So it's a miniaturized Churchill type thing. I thought it was going to do really well. It came bottom, dead last, which, yeah, I'm not sure why. This is the thing with me making infantry tanks for Sprocket contest. They either do great or terrible. There's no in between. Sometimes there is, but usually it's either they come last or they are near the top. So yeah, it has a 57mm gun because, again, this was meant to be an invasion of Sweden. I want to make British tanks, therefore these were Lend-Lease sent over to the Swedish. And so yeah, this was a Swedish. This is like a Swedish Churchill type thing. So it's got a 57mm 6-pounder in it. As for the armour wise, 60mm of frontal armour here, and then we have 45 side, is that, and then what, 30 rear or something, 15 rear because had a weight limit, I think. because technically these are meant to be light tanks. So they're meant to be light tanks, and I've made an infantry tank because that's what I like doing. I like seeing how far I can stretch an infantry tank. But yeah, rear sprocketed there, much like the Churchill, and as you can see it's just an incredibly squished Churchill. And yeah, it didn't do very well, unfortunately. I thought it would do, but no, apparently. The armour was just not saving it against the heavier tanks that were invading Sweden. And yeah, it just didn't do very well. Don't know why. Turret design's a bit weird. It's very like hexagonal, or octagonal I should say. I wasn't too sure how the turret was going to turn out. It didn't turn out particularly brilliant, but it turned out like this. And yeah, this is the tank. But that was only one of 2 submissions I made for it. The other one, I made this thing, the Fulsk Tracked Armoured Car Mark 1. And the reason it's called that is Fulsk, I'm pretty sure, translates to false. So this is an armoured car with tracks, because the rules was no file editing. That was the rules. I, however, wanted to make an armoured car for the meme. So in order to get around that, I basically said, alright, this is an armoured car. However, it can be modified to run on tracks. So it's a tracked armoured car. And it actually came first. It came joint first, which is pretty impressive. I thought this thing was going to be the worst performing out of the 2, this and the Mustang. However, this thing actually came joint first, somehow. And it is basically just an armoured car. The idea, the lore-wise behind this thing, is that the tracks could be removed and it could run on wheels. Or you could have tracks on and it would have, I don't know, extra grip or something. But yeah, that was the whole premise of this thing. I just really wanted an armoured car. This was the armoured car that came out of it. It's not too bad. It has a 2-pounder, I think, in there. Yep, there you go, 2-pounder. 2-pounder anti-tank gun in there. Various spare wheels and stuff. It's got a 50 cal up there. That just shows the rear idler, and then the front sprocket. Rear-engined, obviously, and it is pretty fast for a little light tank / armoured car thing. And yeah, it's got a 2-pounder gun. I have absolutely no clue how this thing did way better than the Churchill, but if you were to be in the Sprocket Discord, you would go look up the results for that contest, scroll all the way to the bottom, there's the Churchill, scroll all the way to the top, here's this thing, joint first, which even the contest host has no clue how this thing did as well as it did. It's a marvel of British engineering. But yeah, that is the Fulsk Tracked Armoured Car. So named because it is a false tracked armoured car. So it's a false armoured car / a real armoured car. It's strange, but I think it looks pretty good, and I quite like this thing. It's kind of cute, kind of squished, and yeah, it's really not bad for an armoured car. The gun has how much penetration? 90mm of penetration, which is pretty impressive. I gave this thing a Little John adapter, which is what this thing's meant to be right here, which is why it squishes, tapers towards the end. It's meant to be like a Little John adapter mounted on there. So yeah, that's the Fulsk armoured car. As for the rest of this stuff, I've been avoiding showing these things because they are projects for my Star Wars content, which if you were to look up the Morsian Empire on something like Star Wars Fandom, you'd find them there. But these things are basically tanks that I made, well, tanks and armoured cars that I made for them in PowerPoint, and I've just recreated here in Sprocket. So this is like their light armoured car thing. It's kind of weird looking, but this is what it is. I don't have a name for it either, but for some reason the sprockets are massive, and I don't know why. They shouldn't be, but yeah, this is it. It's just like a little light armoured car. It's got a little laser cannon in there, rear engine here, which is raised up, and yeah, it's just kind of a weird little armoured car for the Morsans. And yeah, this is how it came out in Sprocket. It's not the greatest. It's not the greatest of my designs here, but you know, it's pretty fast, which for a light armoured car it really should be. It's also kind of big, which I wasn't too happy about. It also doesn't like to turn, as per armoured cars, so yeah, unfortunate, but hey, it fires pretty fast, and yeah, it's not too bad. Not too bad as a little armoured car, but then we've got this thing, which is the emulator main battle tank. This is meant to be green, by the way. Again, missing textures. But yeah, this is meant to be green down the bottom as per my original design, and it's kind of like a modern battle tank. Modern main battle tank. I suppose I can leave a link to the Morgan Empire in the description if you're really interested in seeing it on Star Wars Fanon, plus all of the other stuff I've done for it. But yeah, this is like their main battle tank type thing for the auxiliaries. So it's got a sort of medium/heavy laser gun in there. It's got a heavy repeating blaster up the top, which is replicated here with a 50 cal. It's got a raised rear here. You can have a hover tank version, which obviously we haven't got here in Sprocket, but in the lore you can. It's meant to be a very sort of smooth and slick moulded sort of shape at the front here, and then the driver's port is here, which I've obviously removed. Oh no, there it is, which has obviously been moved inwards, which it's not meant to be, but there you go, there it is. There's where the driver sits, so the driver sits there, and then you've obviously got a radio operator, commander, gunner, etc., loader inside of here, and then various other bits and pieces. But it is like a more modern style main battle tank. It's got cues from something like the Leopard or the Abrams, and also some futuristic designs, like I think a Battlefield 1942 tank has this sort of very curved, smooth design. It's also very much a design like the AMX-40. So if you just think AMX-40 and the sort of smooth curvatures of the AMX-40's hull, that's kind of what this thing's meant to look like. But yeah, it's got a 75mm here in Sprocket, but it's meant to be like a medium laser cannon. And then obviously heavy repeating blaster at the top, coaxial repeating blaster as well, probably. And yeah, that's sort of like their main battle tank for much of the Old Republic, late Old Republic / Imperial era, and then beyond into First Order territory, or indeed Yuzang Von War if we're going for Legends content. But yeah, this is like their main battle tank sort of thing for the cavalry auxiliaries. So that's what this is. And then we do have a couple more designs based off of this. We have got the... where is it? There it is. Armoured Vehicle Imperial Engineers, which is just an AVRE. It's the Armoured Vehicle Royal Engineers. And it's just the copy of it for the Morgans. And it is just an emulator, which emulator translates to chieftain, I'm pretty sure. So it is a chieftain tank, but obviously in Google translated Latin. But what this thing is, it is an emulator which has been had its main gun removed. It's instead got this massive demolition cannon. It's got a front scoop for creating stuff, and it also has a rear crane to recover things. And the crane obviously would be removed when going into combat so that it doesn't interfere with the actuation of the turret. It could just be removed via these areas, probably unbolted or whatever, and then obviously a hook attaches it to the rear. But yeah, this thing is basically just an AVRE, but for the Morgans. So it's pretty simple, pretty self-explanatory, and what it does, it's a big gun, it goes bang, and it makes a big explosion, designed for taking down fortifications, etc., and close support. Basically all the stuff that a real Armoured Vehicle Royal Engineers vehicle would be used for is what the AVIE does instead. So yeah, this is the Armoured Vehicle Imperial Engineers for supporting the, well, Imperial Engineer detachment that's usually attached to the Legions. But yeah, that's what this thing is. It's kind of funny, kind of funky looking, very derpy. However, yeah, it has got a big gun. It can kill things. It has penetration, 159mm of penetration as it is. But yeah, it is an AVIE, an AVRE vehicle, so it's not really designed for taking down things like walkers or enemy tanks and stuff like that. But the final thing that I have here is this thing, which I do actually have a name for now. It's not actually now just a AA tank concept. This thing is, however, an AA tank copy. It's taking cues from something like the Russian anti-aircraft gun, which has got the 2 slits. I can't remember the name of it, but the anti-aircraft tank for the Russians, which has got those 2 slits, which can raise and elevate through there. Obviously, I just haven't modelled the slits because I'm not that good at Sprocket. But we do have this nice AA radar dish on the back, which is pretty fun, and as you can see, once again, it is just an emulator chassis. The idea of the main battle tanks for the Morsians, or at least the tanks of the Morsians, is that they are designed to be modular, which helps with logistics. So the idea is you have got the main hull chassis, which shares all the same parts, the same sort of hull, same sort of turret and everything, so as much interchangeable parts as possible to help with logistics and repair, and then you just change it as per the requirements. So in this case, we needed a medium anti-aircraft gun to shoot down enemy starfighters and stuff, and that's what this is. So it's got 2 medium laser cannons, and they just fire like this. And I have tried to stagger the firing as much as possible. Unfortunately, here in Sprocket, one of them is slightly faster firing than the other, so they do end up hitting each other, basically, and going out of sync and then back into sync. As you can see there, if you listen to it, bong, 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 and then they'll start speeding up again, and there you go, and they're now firing in sync. And then they'll go out of sync as per how I wanted them, and there you go. So, but yeah, this is just the anti-aircraft version. Radar dish, obviously, to help with tracking and things. 2 medium laser cannons to, well, shoot down whatever they're shooting at, usually whatever Imperial stuff's going on. So yeah, nice and simple, and it can also be used to take down light or possibly medium things like ATSTs or medium vehicles, stuff like that. Light repulsor lift vehicles, stuff like that. So that's the design for this thing. I think it's called the Negatio, which I think means negation, basically. So it basically like meaning to deny the air. So it's basically just a denier of the air. So that's what this thing is, anti-aircraft gun. And that's all that I have without going into the British faction, because this is all of the miscellaneous bits and pieces. I don't think I'm missing anything else out from other factions. Let's just have a quick look here. Let's have a look at France. Not the 2nd Armoured, we want just base France, Armée de Terre. Let's have a look for things which don't have pictures. We do have this thing, which I may or may not have shown before, but this is for a French tank destroyer, late war French tank destroyer contest. Again, it's a meme tank. It's got a 170mm gun on it, hence why it is the 170mm Tour de Char 44, obviously 44 standing for the year. It didn't do particularly well in the contest, unfortunately, but it is taking very much Ferdinand or Elephant cues, because again France has been under German occupation, so they're just going to use German technology for as much as they can to get themselves some free tanks. Hence why we've got leaf-sprung suspension, well I say leaf-sprung suspension, overlapping suspension as per German. We also have a sort of Ferdinand looking front, which has got that sort of going up to the engine deck. And then we have got the rear boxy looking thing at the back with a 170mm gun in it. There you go, it is a 17cm Canon 18 model 1944. It is, I believe, like it's a German artillery piece which has been modified into an anti-tank gun. That's what's going on here, hence the mod 1944. Modified by the French to be stuck into this thing. Yeah, it didn't do very well in the contest, unfortunately. I wasn't too happy with it after I made it either, so I wasn't too sad that we didn't win. But yeah, it is a very Ferdinand looking thing with just a massive gun for the meme, because I know I'm never going to really win Sprocket contests if I go for a normal tank, so I instead go with meme tanks and see how they work. That's how I get my fun from these things. Do have this thing which was for I can't remember what contest this was for, but it's basically taking the RLM 35A, basically taking this thing, which is an artillery tractor thing that I made, which I'm still very happy with. For the French, it's basically taking this thing and sticking an artillery piece on it for some sort of support, artillery support. So it's got a, I think, 6-inch naval gun on this thing. Oh no, it's a 152mm Model 1930 French naval gun, because this is a naval gun mounting. So yeah, it's got this French naval gun mounted onto the back. I wasn't able to get it through for the contest because I couldn't get all of the restrictions. I think there was a weight limit as well. Plus the suspension dies, as you can see from the weight of this thing, because that's how this suspension works in Sprocket. It's not actually very good, this HVSS suspension in Sprocket. But yeah, so there's this thing. I think that's the only thing you haven't seen out of the French faction. Let me just check Jerry. I don't think Japan has got anything. Japan might. Don't know if I've shown you these things, but these are... This was for a Japanese contest, which Sprocket updated, and it broke this thing and I couldn't submit it for the contest, which is kind of sad. It's a Japanese light tank. Oh, that's what happened. That's right. We had engines that we had to choose, engine presets that we had to use, and the worse engines, the more points you got, basically, because the Japanese army was on cost-cutting measures at the start of the war, etc., etc. And so there was this engine which I chose for this because it got me the most points. And this was the engine preset. Sprocket changed how engine power and traction and gearboxes work, and it made this thing basically unusable, because there was also a mobility requirement which required you to get up to, I think, 20 kilometers an hour or something, or 20 miles an hour or something like that, and this engine just couldn't do it. It was physically impossible for this engine to get you up to that speed, which meant that anyone who used this engine had to use something else. And again, there was weight limit, there was internal limit and stuff like that, so I wasn't able to use this thing, unfortunately, and I pulled out of the contest because I couldn't build something within the time limit to replace it. So yeah, there was this thing. I think I've shown you all of these other things, like the Type 90, which I'm pretty sure I've shown as well. So let's switch to Germany, the Wehrmacht, there you go. Let's see what's in here. Black Panzer Königsmörder, which you've seen. I think you've seen probably everything else that's in here. I mean, there's this thing, which this was also originally for the Spanish Civil War. I had to change it a little bit. It was for the Spanish Civil War, and I did submit it, I think. Or did I? I don't know if I did, actually. But yeah, this was for the Spanish Civil War. It had a Spanish... the counter... it was something like, "We have passed," or something, is what it translates to. Something like that. It's what Franco said after they captured Madrid or something like that, or maybe Barcelona, whatever was the capital for the Republicans at that time. They captured it because the Republicans were like, "Oh, you'll never take it," and then they took it, and then Franco just said, "Oh, we have passed," which is what they said, because the Republicans were saying something like, "You will not pass," or "You will not get it," or something like that. But anyway, so yeah, there's that, and it was basically just the Aufrung C version, because I originally built this. It's a LOL tractor copy, basically. This was originally interwar. The contest required early war, hence why it's the Aufrung C. It allowed me to bring it into the early war era. That's what that was. As for everything else, you've seen all of these things. I think you might have seen this as well. The Sonderkraftfahrzeug 750. It was built for an ASIMA contest, which is to say one of the RPC challenges. It's kind of like a modern-looking late-war German tank. It didn't do very well. It did better than either of the others. As you can see, I haven't updated it since I made it, because it's got no ammo, and the gun also doesn't raise, doesn't elevate. I would need to go ahead and fix all of this and everything, and add ammo and blah blah blah. But yeah, I think that's everything for all of the factions. There's nothing else in here. Nothing else in here that I really need to show other than the British stuff, which I will show in the next episode of Sprocket. Let me just check Italy. Oh yeah, this was the Italian tank that I submitted for the contest, the Spanish Civil War contest. It is a M639, which we have seen before. There it is, there's the base M639. It's basically this identical, maybe some minor changes, and then it was sent off to go with the Italian Corpo Truppe Volontieri, I think is what the Italian volunteers for the nationalists were. But either way, this was it that I submitted. It didn't do very well. It did far and away the worst out of everyone's tanks there, which is kind of a shame. But yeah, that is it for tanks beyond the British tanks, which I am going to show you in the next episode. So I will thank you all for watching, and goodbye.